I opened my door at 3 a.m., and he knew my name. The man at the end of the hall. I've lived in this apartment building for 3 years now, and in all that time, I've never once thought of it as creepy. Old? Sure. Worn down? Definitely. But haunted? No. It's one of those early 1900s buildings that hasn't been updated in decades. The kind with brass doorknobs dulled from 100 years of use, and a mail slot in every door instead of a mailbox in the lobby. The walls are painted a tired beige that was probably bright and cheerful sometime in the 70s. And the hallways always smell faintly of dust, floor polish, and something else I could never place. Maybe a hint of damp that's been sitting too long. I used to like the building's personality. Every creak of the floorboards and hiss of the radiator felt like part of the charm. My apartment itself is cozy. One bedroom, one bathroom, a tiny kitchen, and just enough room for a couch and a TV. I work late nights, so most evenings, I come home to a quiet building, nod at the night guard in the lobby, and head upstairs. Nothing out of the ordinary. That changed last Tuesday night. It had been a long shift. My boss had decided to keep me late, and by the time I got off, it was just after midnight. The streets outside were nearly empty, and a light drizzle made the air smell of wet asphalt. I took the bus back, climbed the front steps of the building, and gave a tired wave to Raj, the night guard. He didn't even look up from his phone. The moment I stepped into the second floor hallway, I knew something was different. Normally, the corridor is lit by a single ceiling bulb at the far end, near the fire exit. It's one of those ugly yellow bulbs that flickers a little and hums quietly if you stand under it too long. But that night, it was out. The only light came from the faint, almost sickly red glow of the exit sign above the fire door. Everything else was swallowed by shadow. I remember shifting my grocery bag from one hand to the other, thinking, great, another thing the landlord won't fix. My footsteps echoed oddly, louder than usual, almost like I wasn't alone in the hall. That was the first thing that made my stomach tighten. Then I saw him. At first, I thought it was one of my neighbors, just standing there at the far end of the hallway. He was positioned directly beneath the exit sign, so the red light turned him into a silhouette, tall, narrow-shouldered, motionless. I slow my pace. Hey, I call, my voice bouncing off the walls. Everything okay? He didn't move. There was something wrong about his outline. His head jutted forward at an odd angle, and his arms hung too low. So low that even from this distance, I could tell his fingertips reached almost to his knees. I stopped completely. My skin prickled, every instinct screaming that something wasn't right. For a long moment, we just stared at each other, or at least I stared at him. I couldn't even see his face. The shadows seemed to swallow it whole. I took a cautious step forward, my heart thudding in my ears. My shoes squeaked faintly against the old linoleum. The figure didn't react. I reached into my pocket for my phone. My hand was shaking a little as I opened the flashlight app, the bright LED beam slicing through the darkness. The hallway was empty. No figure. No one standing under the exit sign. Just a fire door shut tight. I froze, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing, or rather, what I wasn't seeing. I could still feel the weight of being watched, as if whatever had been there hadn't actually left. Slowly, I backed toward my apartment door. My keys jingled too loudly as I unlocked it, slipped inside, and shut it behind me. I leaned against the door for a moment, listening to the silence. I didn't sleep well that night. It wasn't just because of the figure, or the lack of one. It was the way the hallway had felt. You know that sensation you get when someone stands behind you, even if you can't see them? Like a subtle pressure in the air, the prickle of invisible eyes crawling over your back. That stayed with me. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The rain outside had turned into a steady drizzle, tapping rhythmically against my window. Normally, that sound would lull me to sleep, but now it seemed to sync with my heartbeat in an unsettling way. Slow, then too fast, then slow again. Every creak of the old building suddenly sounded deliberate, as though someone was shifting their weight just outside my door. The radiator hissed like a slow, drawn-out sigh. The fridge in the kitchen clicked on with a low hum, and I nearly flinched. I must have drifted off eventually, because I woke up at 3:14 a.m., and I remember that exact time because the red glow of my digital clock was burned into my eyes the moment I opened them. There was a sound. Soft. Barely audible. SHFFFD. 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 It was the sound of fabric brushing against something, clothing sliding over walls. Slow footsteps, not the heavy heel-first steps of boots or shoes, but the almost dragging gait of someone in socks or barefoot. They were in the hallway. I froze. My apartment door isn't thick. If someone was out there, they could probably hear me breathe. I tried to make it as quiet as possible, my chest barely rising and falling. The sound past my door didn't stop, didn't speed up, just kept moving toward the far end of the hall, the exact spot I'd seen a figure. For a few seconds, there was silence. Then, faintly, a single, slow knock. I sat up in bed, my pulse pounding in my throat. Who the hell was knocking at 3 in the morning? My first thought was that maybe one of my neighbors had locked themselves out and needed help. But then I realized they weren't knocking on anyone's apartment door. They were knocking on the fire exit. 3 knocks. Long pause. 3 more knocks. It was rhythmic, deliberate. I didn't move until the sound faded, replaced by that dragging shuffle again, this time heading back toward my apartment. I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth ached. The steps stopped right outside my door. I could see the faintest shadow under the gap between the door and the floor, like someone was standing there, blocking the dim light from the exit sign. And then, nothing. No footsteps leaving. No door opening. No sound of someone walking away. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at that shadow, my body frozen. At some point, my vision started to blur, my eyes burning from not blinking. Finally, I blinked, and the shadow was gone. I must have sat there for another hour, maybe more. My muscles ached from staying tense. My jaw hurt from clenching it. Every time I thought about getting up, my eyes would drift to the door again, half expecting that shadow to return. The red numbers on my clock shifted to 5:02 a.m. Dawn wasn't far off. I told myself I'd be safe once the sun rose, like daylight was some kind of magic shield that would burn away whatever the hell was out there. That's when the sound came again. Not footsteps this time. Breathing. Slow. Heavy. Right on the other side of the door. I could hear the faint whistle of air through a nose, the occasional soft click of teeth as the breath shifted. My skin crawled. It was too steady, too slow, like the breathing of someone who knew I was listening. I don't know what possessed me, but I stood up. Maybe it was adrenaline. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was the simple fact that I was tired of feeling hunted in my own home. My legs shook as I walked to the door. I pressed my ear to the wood. The breathing stopped. My heart hammered. I could feel it in my fingertips, my throat, my temples. My hand hovered over the deadbolt, every nerve in my body screaming don't. But another part of me, the reckless, stubborn part, turned it anyway. The click of the lock was deafening. I opened the door. The hallway was empty. At least, it looked empty. The light from the exit sign flickered once, twice, bathing the far end of the hall in a stuttering red glow. And there he was. Tall. Thin. Too thin. His clothes hung off him like they'd been soaked and dried 100 times over, stiff and wrinkled. His head tilted slightly to one side, as though his neck couldn't quite support it. But the thing that froze me to the spot was his face. It wasn't that it was deformed or grotesque. It was worse. It was ordinary. An utterly forgettable face, like the kind you'd pass 1,000 times on the street and never remember. But his eyes remembered me. We stared at each other for what felt like an eternity. Then, without breaking eye contact, he started walking toward me. Step, drag, step, drag. I backed into my apartment, my hand fumbling for the door handle. My breathing came fast and shallow now, the exact opposite of his. Step, drag. He crossed half the distance, then stopped. His lips moved. At first, I thought he was speaking, but no sound came out. I strained to hear, and that's when I realized he was mouthing something. My name, over and over, like he was tasting it. I slammed the door shut, locked it, threw the chain across, and stumbled backward. The knocks came immediately. 3. Pause. 3. They rattled the frame, the chain, the hinges. And then, silence. I didn't move until the first light of morning spilled through my blinds. When I finally opened the door again, the hallway was empty. But there, scratched into the wood of the fire exit at the far end, were the words, "I know where you sleep."